Hey everyone, welcome back to Broadcasting Seeds, where we dig deep into the strange, the unknown, and the downright eerie. I'm Bennett Tanton, and today we're diving into something that may just give you that don't look over your shoulder kind of feeling. It's the witching hour. Yep, that slice of the night from midnight to 4 a.m. where things get a little weird, or a lot weird, depending on who you ask. Now, if you're wondering why you've suddenly felt a chill down your spine at 3 a.m., don't worry, you're not alone. This mysterious stretch of time has been known throughout history to be when the veil between worlds is at its thinnest. It's when things go bump in the night, shadows seem a little too alive, and some folks believe this is the perfect time for spirits, entities, and otherworldly beings to make their entrance. But here's the twist that makes it even more fascinating. Science? Yep. Our good old logical friend science has a few explanations that might surprise you. We're talking sleep cycles, psychological phenomena, and why our minds are wired to feel like we're not alone during these hours. But does that explain everything? Or is there more lurking out there in the depths of the night? So, buckle up, maybe leave a light on, and get ready as we explore the terrifying yet compelling lore of the witching hour. We'll dig into chilling first-hand accounts of those who've had close encounters, the ancient beliefs that shaped this mystical time, and even a bit of science that might shed light on the darkness. And don't worry, I'll throw in a few ways to protect yourself, just in case you're tuning in after midnight. All right, if you're still with me and not reaching for the holy water, let's crack open the door to Midnight Mysteries and see what's lurking on the other side. Or not. Your call. So let's start by taking a journey back, way back, to understand where this whole witching hour thing came from. Because let's be real, people didn't just suddenly decide, hey, you know what? I'm going to get creeped out at 3 a.m. Nope, this has been a long time coming, and our ancestors played a big part in setting the stage for what we now know as the witching hour. Now, one of the oldest recorded references to this spooky stretch of time comes from ancient Rome. They had this belief that spirits and gods would wander the earth at night, and disturbing them was, let's say, not advisable. Romans, like many of us today, didn't exactly want to bump into an angry spirit while they were stumbling around in the dark, and, interestingly enough, they also believed in keeping a kind of quiet time during these hours, out of respect, or maybe fear, for the supernatural forces they thought were roaming around. But the real heavy hitters in this midnight mystique were the medieval Europeans. They coined the term witching hour, and they weren't messing around. See? The church at the time had a lot of influence on how people viewed the spiritual world, and they believed that witches and dark forces were especially powerful between midnight and 4 a.m. It was the prime time for witches' rituals, casting spells, and all manner of otherworldly activity. Now, whether there was any truth to this or it was just a way to control people's fear of the unknown, who's to say? But the church wasn't taking any chances. They warned people that the devil himself could be particularly active during these hours. What's fascinating is that this concept of a supernatural hotspot in the dead of night isn't just limited to Europe. In Japan, there's a similar belief around 3 a.m. being a time when evil spirits are more likely to wander. Japanese folklore tells us that ghosts, or eerie, are most likely to appear in this window, and if you wake up around that time, it's believed to be a warning that some kind of spiritual activity is happening nearby. Imagine that. Waking up in a dark room, the clock reads 3 a.m., and suddenly you remember the stories of the eerie. I don't know about you, but that's enough to make me pull the covers up just a little higher. Then we've got our friends in the Middle East who have long believed in spirits called jinn, beings that are neither angelic nor demonic, but something in between. They're believed to roam freely after dark, and encountering one isn't exactly the highlight of anyone's night. And just like with other cultures, the early morning hours are considered prime time for these entities to appear. Even Native American tribes have stories about this in-between time. They didn't call it the witching hour, but there's a shared understanding that certain hours of the night are more open, so to speak, to forces from beyond. These traditions vary, but many tribes, like the Navajo, have stories about entities that lurk around during these hours, creatures of the night that you'd rather not meet. So, no matter where you look around the world, this witching hour concept is a kind of universal theme. Our ancestors may have been separated by oceans, languages, and beliefs, but they all shared an understanding that there's something special or maybe dangerous about this time of night. It's as if, somewhere deep in our collective psyche, humanity has always sensed that the wee hours between midnight and dawn carry an energy we don't fully understand. Now, is this just ancient superstition? Or did they know something we've maybe lost touch with in our modern, scientifically minded world? It's an open question, and one that we'll keep exploring. But for now, what's clear is that the witching hour has roots and beliefs as old as time, and those beliefs still haunt us to this day. Buckle up, because this is where we dive into the heart of it, those real-life encounters people have experienced during the witching hour. From the eerie to the downright terrifying, these stories have one thing in common. They all happened when most of the world was fast asleep, and the veil between our world and whatever else might be out there seemed to thin. Let's start with one of the most commonly reported experiences during the witching hour, sleep paralysis. Now, if you haven't experienced this, count yourself lucky, because for those who have, it's described as a nightmare while you're awake. Imagine lying in bed, unable to move, unable to speak, and then from the corner of your eye you see a shadow figure, maybe a person, maybe something less defined. It's moving towards you, pressing down on your chest, and all you can do is watch. Many people report feeling a distinct presence in the room, one that's not exactly friendly. One story comes from a guy named Mike. He woke up around 3:15 a.m., unable to move. He felt this crushing weight on his chest and saw a dark figure standing at the end of his bed. Now, Mike's a skeptic, doesn't believe in ghosts or demons, but that night shook him. The figure didn't do anything. It just watched him, and then as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. When Mike finally could move, he was drenched in sweat, heart racing, wondering what he had just experienced. Was it sleep paralysis, or was there something else in the room with him? But the witching hour isn't just about things that go bump in the night while we're half asleep. Some encounters happen when people are fully awake. Take Maria, for example. She was driving home late one night after a shift at the hospital. Her route took her down a lonely stretch of road with no lights and hardly any other cars. She says she saw something crossing the road, something big, on two legs, covered in dark fur. Now, Maria doesn't claim it was Bigfoot, But whatever it was wasn't human. When she slowed down, it turned to look at her, and in her words, those eyes were like nothing I've ever seen. Dark, reflective, and intelligent. Whatever it was, it vanished into the trees, leaving Maria shaken and questioning what she'd just seen. And then, of course, there are the stories of ghostly visitors. This one comes from a woman named Sarah. She was up late with her baby, who just couldn't seem to settle. She went to get a glass of water, and when she returned to the nursery, she swears she saw an old woman standing by her baby's crib, looking down at the child with a smile. Sarah was frozen, staring at this stranger in her home, but just as quickly as she appeared, the woman faded. Now, Sarah found out later that the previous homeowner, an older woman, had passed away in that very room. Was it her spirit coming back to check on the little one, or was it just Sarah's mind playing tricks on her in her sleep-deprived state? But perhaps one of the strangest stories I've come across happened to a man named Jacob. Now, Jacob's encounter falls under the shadow people phenomenon, a type of supernatural experience that's been reported worldwide. One night, Jacob woke up around 3:30 a.m. and felt like someone was watching him. When he opened his eyes, he saw a shadowy figure standing in the corner of his room. But here's the kicker. The figure didn't just stand there. It started to glide across the room slowly, as if studying him. Jacob says he felt a mixture of fear and curiosity, but when he tried to get up, he found he couldn't move. The shadow approached, got right up next to his face, and then disappeared. The experience left Jacob shaken for days, wondering if he'd encountered something that wasn't just a trick of the light. Now, as unnerving as these encounters are, they share something in common: the time they took place, midnight to 4 a.m., when the world is at its quietest. And according to these people, the otherworldly seems to come out to play. Are they all just stories? Some kind of collective hallucination tied to our body's natural rhythms? Or are they glimpses into a world that operates just on the edges of our own? These accounts are just the tip of the iceberg, but they give us a look at the different kinds of strange encounters people have had during the witching hour. Real or imagined, they're all tied to that universal feeling of unease we get in the dead of night. It's a time when our brains maybe are open to things we'd normally shut out. And as we'll see in the next section, science has a few ideas about why these kinds of experiences are so common during these hours. It's time to bring in the big guns, science. I know, maybe you're thinking, what's science got to do with the witching hour? But stick with me, because it turns out the brain and body can do some downright strange things between midnight and 4 a.m., and that might just help explain why so many people experience these spooky, unexplainable encounters during the wee hours. Let's start with something you've probably heard of: sleep cycles. Our bodies have this internal clock called the circadian rhythm, and it's responsible for keeping us on a 24-hour cycle of sleep and wakefulness. During the night, we pass through various stages of sleep, from light sleep to deep sleep, and of course, REM sleep, where most of our vivid dreaming happens. And as the night progresses, our sleep gets lighter, especially in the early morning hours between 2 and 4 a.m. That lighter sleep stage can make us more aware of our surroundings, and sometimes more aware of things we'd rather not notice. Now, let's throw sleep paralysis into the mix. This happens when your brain wakes up before your body does, so you're aware, but you can't move. About 8% of the general population has experienced sleep paralysis, and it's even more common among people with irregular sleep schedules. In a lot of these cases, people report seeing shadow people or feeling a weight on their chest. Scientists explain this by saying that our brains are still partially in dream mode even though we're awake. The result, we see things that aren't there, or at least things science claims aren't there. But here's where it gets interesting. Studies show that sleep paralysis isn't the only phenomenon linked to this early morning period. Around 3 a.m., our body temperature is at its lowest. Our metabolism slows down, and levels of the sleep hormone melatonin are at their peak. We're at our most vulnerable physically and psychologically. So if you wake up around this time feeling groggy, weak, and maybe a bit disoriented, well, that's pretty normal, but that feeling of vulnerability also makes us more susceptible to feeling a presence. Our brains are primed to interpret shadows, sounds, and even slight changes in temperature as threats. Then there's the concept of the presence phenomenon, which is when people feel like someone or something is nearby watching them. This feeling can happen during sleep paralysis or just from waking up suddenly in the middle of the night. Neuroscientists suggest that it's a kind of brain glitch. The mind, in its half-awake state, confuses parts of itself as something other. It's like the brain is projecting part of its own awareness outwards, making it seem like there's a second being in the room. Kind of creepy, right? But here's where science gets a little fuzzy. While it's easy to say, oh, it's just your brain tricking you, some researchers think there might be more to it. There's this whole field of study called neurotheology, where scientists look at how spiritual experiences might actually be real events that our brains pick up on. In other words, maybe we're wired to sense something beyond ourselves, and it just happens to work overtime between midnight and 4 a.m. So maybe science can't rule out the supernatural entirely after all. And let's not forget about the psychological impact of fear and suggestion. If you've heard that 3 a.m. is the devil's hour, your mind's going to be on high alert if you happen to wake up then. Studies show that even subtle beliefs can shape our experiences. The more we expect to encounter something strange, the more likely we are to interpret everyday sounds or shadows as something otherworldly. So, is the witching hour just a perfect storm of biology, psychology, and suggestion? Maybe. Or maybe these phenomena are tapping into something more. As humans, we have this built-in radar that makes us alert to danger, especially in the dark when we're alone. And in the stillness of the night with our defenses down, who's to say we're not picking up on something real, something just out of sight? Okay, so we've looked at history, we've looked at science, but now it's time to take a leap into the realm of the extraordinary. What if there's more to the witching hour than sleep cycles and creepy shadows? What if, just maybe, this eerie time actually opens a gateway to other worlds? Now, before you start thinking I've gone off the deep end, let me tell you that this idea of crossing dimensions isn't just a plot twist for horror movies. The concept of multiple dimensions has been entertained by some of the sharpest minds in physics. Think of theories like string theory or the multiverse hypothesis. They suggest that our reality might just be one layer of many. And if that's true, then maybe, just maybe, the witching hour is a time when the barriers between these layers are, well, a little weaker. So how would that work? Why would midnight to 4 a.m. be the sweet spot for interdimensional weirdness? Some theorists believe it has to do with the state of our consciousness during this time. As we covered, this period aligns with our lightest sleep and most vulnerable state, both physically and mentally. In other words, our guard is down, which might make it easier for us to perceive things that normally go unnoticed. It's kind of like when a radio station is between frequencies, you hear static, but every now and then something else cuts through. Could it be that during the witching hour we're tuning into another frequency of existence? There are countless stories of people who believe they've had interdimensional encounters during the early morning hours. Take, for example, the account of a man named Ray, who woke up at exactly 3:11 a.m. to find himself not in his bedroom, but in a room that looked just like it, only different. The furniture was arranged in ways he'd never seen before, and the air felt thick, almost like he was underwater. When he tried to get up, he realized he couldn't move. In a panic, he blinked, and suddenly he was back in his own bed. Everything as it should be, but Ray swears it was no dream. He believes he somehow slipped into a parallel version of his own room, one that existed in a slightly different reality. Then, there's the phenomenon known as time slips, where people report finding themselves in a place that seems normal at first, only to realize it belongs to another time or even another dimension. Many of these encounters, interestingly enough, are said to happen between midnight and 4 a.m. People describe hearing strange sounds, voices from nowhere, or even seeing beings who don't seem to belong in this world. The theory goes that in these quiet, isolated hours, the fabric of time and space might be more flexible, allowing brief glimpses or even physical crossings into other dimensions. Now, there are plenty of skeptics who will say that these stories are just dreams or tricks of the mind. But here's a twist. Some researchers in quantum physics have proposed that dimensions may not be as separate as we think. In fact, they suggest that under the right conditions, different dimensions could interact. Think of it like bubbles floating in the air. Every now and then, two bubbles touch, creating a thin layer where they connect. Could the witching hour be that layer where our bubble brushes up against another? And it's not just modern science that entertains this idea. Ancient cultures, as we covered earlier, had similar beliefs about this mystical time. Some Native American tribes, for instance, viewed the early hours as a period when the spirits of the past and future could communicate with the present. And, in Celtic lore, midnight marked the start of the otherworld's most active hours, a place where fairies, spirits, and other entities crossed over into our realm. Could these ancient beliefs hint at a deeper understanding of how different worlds might be connected? Of course, none of this is definitive proof, but the stories, the cultural beliefs, and even the scientific theories give us a lot to think about. They suggest that maybe we don't fully understand the boundaries of our own reality or the possibilities that exist just beyond them. Whether it's a doorway, a thin spot in the veil, or just our minds playing tricks, the witching hour holds an undeniable allure. It's a time when the ordinary rules seem to bend, and we're left wondering if we've seen a piece of something beyond our understanding. All right, we've covered a lot so far, from the origins of the witching hour to some chilling encounters and even the possibility of slipping into other dimensions. But now let's talk about something a bit more practical: how to stay safe, especially if you find yourself wide awake at 3 a.m. feeling like something just isn't right. Believe it or not, there are plenty of people around the world who take precautions when it comes to the witching hour. Different cultures have all kinds of rituals and practices to keep unwanted presences at bay. And while some of them might sound a little superstitious, hey, sometimes a little peace of mind goes a long way. One of the most common practices, especially in European folklore, is the simple act of covering mirrors. Mirrors are often seen as portals, especially at night when the reflection seems darker and maybe a little too lifelike. The idea is that mirrors can reflect more than just our own world, especially during the witching hour. To play it safe, some people cover their mirrors before going to bed, just to make sure nothing's staring back at them in the middle of the night. Even if you're not a believer, there's something about it that feels instinctively right, isn't there? Then we have the ancient tradition of using salt as a barrier. Salt, particularly in folklore and witchcraft, has long been considered a powerful tool for protection. Sprinkling a line of salt along your doors or windowsills is said to create a boundary that spirits and unwanted entities can't cross. Now, does it work? Hard to say, but many who practice it swear by it. And hey, even if it doesn't, at least you've got some extra seasoning close by, right? Another big one is prayer or reciting protective verses. Across religions and belief systems, words are seen as powerful tools that can ward off negativity or evil. In Christianity, for example, the Lord's Prayer or the 23rd Psalm are often used as a means of spiritual protection. In Hinduism, chanting mantras is believed to drive away evil spirits. So if you're ever feeling that strange presence in the dark, reciting a prayer or mantra can serve as both a spiritual shield and a mental anchor, helping you regain control and calm. Some Native American traditions suggest burning sage or sweetgrass to cleanse the space of any negative energy or entities. This ritual, often referred to as smudging, is thought to purify the air and create a protective barrier. Sage, in particular, is believed to neutralize the energies around us, sort of like hitting the reset button. If you're feeling extra cautious during the witching hour, a quick smudging session might give you a sense of calm and control over the environment. Then there's the power of objects. A lot of people place protective items by their bedside or carry them as charms. Crystals like black tourmaline or amethyst are popular choices for their supposed protective qualities, and in some folk traditions, certain symbols like a cross, a horseshoe, or even a simple iron nail are used to keep supernatural forces at bay. Whether you view these objects as genuinely protective or more of a mental placebo, there's something comforting about having a guardian of sorts nearby. And here's one that might seem obvious but is often overlooked. Stay grounded. I mean that literally. Many spiritual practitioners believe that keeping your feet on the ground, barefoot ideally, can help you feel more connected and protected, especially during vulnerable hours like the witching hour. The idea is that grounding yourself creates a solid barrier between you and whatever might be floating around in the ether. So if you wake up in a panic at 3 a.m., stand up, feel the ground beneath you, and remind yourself that you're in control of your space. Now, does all of this mean you'll never have a creepy encounter during the witching hour? Not necessarily, but it's interesting how these practices all share a common theme: creating boundaries, regaining control, and finding peace of mind. Whether these are actual defenses against supernatural forces or just ways to soothe our own nervous minds, they seem to work for a lot of people. And look, maybe you don't believe in any of this. Maybe you think the witching hour is just another part of the night, and the stories are all in our heads. But when it's 3 a.m., the house is quiet, and you feel that chill down your spine. Having a little salt, a mirror cover, or a mantra ready doesn't sound so silly, does it? we've taken quite a ride through the strange and chilling realm of the witching hour. From ancient lore and spine-tingling encounters to the science of sleep cycles and the possibility of other dimensions brushing up against ours, this slice of the night has given us a lot to think about. Maybe the witching hour is just a relic of superstition, or maybe it's the time when we're closest to the unknown, with our guard down and our senses open to things beyond explanation. Either way, next time you find yourself wide awake at 3 a.m., remember what we talked about tonight. You're not alone. People across history and around the world have had experiences just like yours. And whether you're reaching for the salt, covering the mirrors, or saying a little prayer, it's all about finding what keeps you grounded in those unsettling moments. And hey, if you enjoyed diving into the mysteries of the witching hour with me, don't forget to show some love to Broadcasting Seeds. Hit that like button, share this episode with anyone who's brave enough to listen, and make sure to leave a review wherever you're tuning in from. Your support helps keep these seeds growing, bringing more mysteries and wild topics your way. So until next time, keep your mind open, stay curious, and remember, there's a whole world out there that we're only just beginning to understand. Thanks for joining me on this journey, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Stay safe out there, especially around midnight.
I got bad thoughts that make my mind scared, hold me hostage and they don't fight fair. Who gon' pray for me and wipe all my tears? Who gon' save me if you not right here? Move this darkness and make my sight clear. Take me away cause I don't like here. Ghosts of my past, they feeling the night air. Wake me up, I'm trapped in my nightmares. Wake me up, I'm trapped in my nightmares. Drowning, I'm off the deep end. Apparitions of all my demons. All my thoughts are committing treason. All alone, who gon' hear me screaming? Manifestations of my fears, regrets that stretched out for light years. Can almost touch the light, homie, it's right there. Body free but trapped in my nightmares. Wake me up, don't let me drown. All the lights are fading